Hello, everyone. As you can see clearly on this screen, UU is going to be suspecting Spectrier, um, which, as you can tell by the glorious thumbnail created by yours truly, we're going to be having a very serious discussion about. Joining me, I have probably the second most openly opinionated person on this tier, being the tier leader herself, Frito. Say hi.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frito, and I'm the best player in this tier, so that makes me uniquely qualified to talk about it.
I didn't even introduce myself. I'm Celeste. I'm the most chatty player in this tier, and I'm also good. Not as good as Frito, but like, I'm fine.
She just never stops talking.
I don't. It's like, we're not going to show any of it, but like, you go into the forums and it's a 99% chance that I've dumped at least 4 paragraphs. Um, but anyways, we're looking at some paragraphs that Frito's written right now, just talking about just kind of the baseline of Spectrier, which we're going to start off with, and then I have some replays that Frito's probably seen some of. I looked through. I have thoughts. I have feelings. And this is kind of just a chance for us to discuss our opinions, mostly unbiasedly, but there is some bias because, that's how it
What are you
goes.
talking about? Of course I'm biased. I'm hella biased. You know this.
We're going to pretend that we're unbiased so that the people listen. Anyways, why don't you give us kind of, you've written it down for you, so nice. Why don't you give us kind of our introduction to Spectrier?
Yeah, so Spectrier is primarily seen as an HO Pokemon in the current metagame. As HO really rose to prominence, like, especially during the end of the Zation meta,
Yeah.
before it was banned, we saw a lot of HO because there wasn't really good forms of speed control in the tier. So it was really hard to get things like Zacian, Spectrier, occasionally Dragon Dance Arceus under control without when they were supported with webs.
Mm-hmm.
After Zacian left, HO still remained the most dominant playstyle. Um, and Spectrier's kind of just been like a center point on most HO teams because
Mm-hmm.
it's essentially the second fastest mon in the tier viably, behind really just Deoxys at this point. Sure, Iron
Yeah.
Bundle's around, but Iron Bundle also
It's like,
doesn't threaten Spectrier at all.
no, I
So
think
we're
if I
not
remember
really
if I remember
going.
off the top of my head, I think you need rocks damage for a life orb hydro pump to like threaten. It's something like that. Because Spectre is not very bulky, and I mean we're gonna get into that. Its frailty is kind of, I think, one of the things that gives it some grievances in this tier. But it's got enough to save off things like Bundle, and Bundle can't really hit hard enough to threaten too much in this tier. I mean, it's fine. It's like on Encore, but
Yeah, but I mean, Encore also really isn't a threat to Spectrier anyways. But
yeah.
anyways, so Spectrier, as I kind of alluded to in the post, that made some people angry, but I can justify my reasoning for it. Spectrier really only has one pet, especially because it only fits on HO right now. Um,
Mhm.
so you're gonna see for sure. You're gonna see Nasty Plot,
Mhm.
Shadow Ball, and Draining Kiss,
It's
and
actually a
then the
good
last
chance.
slot could be either Taunt, Will-O-Wisp.
Switch over to our builder
Yeah,
here.
yes, Taunt, Will-O-Wisp, Sable,
Sub,
Substitute. Each
yeah.
of those has their um, the most common one right now is Taunt because it prevents Pokemon that could live hits from Spectrier unboosted,
Hmm.
stuff like Arceus and Roaring Moon with Terra, to it stops them from setting up and then OHKOing Spectrier and going
Hmm.
on a rampage otherwise.
It lets.
However, Wisp is still very strong, crippling physical attackers they try to set up on you, so
Mhm.
then you can actually live the hit right after it, even though this thing only has 160 physical bulk. It is enough to live a non-super effective physical attack from most physical attackers if you've managed to
Mm-hmm.
burn them. And then other things like Stun and Disable lose a little bit more, but you can potentially fit
Mm-hmm.
them, um, especially on webs, because you could use that as an opportunity to set up into stuff like E-Killer Arceus, because you can disable
Yeah.
their coverage move if they used it to revenge kill something. And then you can bring in Spectrier and plot in their face.
And
Um,
there's some other sets that you see get
there
thrown
are other
around.
sets.
Yeah, we're gonna lightly touch on Scarf at the end, just be like at the end of this little segment, because that is the only set that has shown any semblance of being able to be consistent. Yeah, you can ask people.
Kind
There's a
of
few
HO.
replays. Yeah, there's a few replays circling around of CM of like sub CM hex sets circling around, and like have they won games? Yes. The reason we're not covering them here is because it's kind of running them has been recently limited to a very few amount of players spread over about a long period of time, so we don't have enough data for how the meta's looking right now outside of literally like 2 games in the past 2 months on how those sets can succeed. So we're just kind of opting to move past them just because, again, people are going to
And
get angry about
just
it.
speaking from more personal experience, when I was running the set,
Mm,
it does have some merits. However,
mhm.
the problem with Spectrier is this lack of bulk. Even when invested, it's not going to be taking hits
Yeah.
particularly well. So these CM Spectrier sets, especially because
Mhm.
they really want life orb still, because you don't
Yeah.
actually do that much damage if you're not
That's
life
the
orb.
thing. And
They
especially
really only
because
fit on stuff like Grassy Terrain, where they could
grassy
get
terrain,
some
yeah.
forms of passive recovery while they're setting up.
Because
So
that's the thing
although
about the
people have
CM
ran the
sets.
bulky sets, it's not really
Yeah.
worth it.
And that's the thing about the CM sets as well, is that a lot of the time, because you're not setting up as fast as you would with Nasty Plot, you're trying to rely on Hex and Will-O-Wisp to accomplish your damage, and when Hex isn't getting that double, it's really weak. You're doing nothing. Um, I mean, it's been theorized putting this thing on Toxic Spikes, but then you remember that Toxic Spikes in this tier are probably the worst they've ever been. Um, from my experience in this tier anyway, they're really bad right now. Um, but I guess yeah, let's get into the main bread and butter. I mean, we've already talked about it. I forgot to put EVs on this set because I accidentally deleted this little team I made. But this is what makes Spectrier click. Plot, just to boost as fast as you can. Shadow Ball. This is a really good tier to be an offensive ghost in right now, because Ghost is like the only normal. And Draining Kiss is going to be able to pretty effectively handle both, well, I guess, well, most of the darks we have right now. I mean, we talked about Roaring Moon. When it Terras, it's going to be taking those Draining Kisses quite comfortably, but if you can get boost going, it's really hard to stop a set like this because Ghost Fairy coverage is going to hit almost everything. Again, we talked about that last move. That can be Taunt, that can be Disable, that can be Substitute, Will-O-Wisp. Most of the time it's Taunt. This basically allows Spectrier to do one of the things it's best at, which is kind of being able to snowball. That's the main goal of this set anyway, being able to set up as much as possible, as soon as possible, and to start outgoing things. Because especially, as we're going to see, when chip damage comes into play, there's not a lot that can actually properly handle, like, a Spectre that gets a nasty plot off and then gets a kill. Because it is just doing a ton of damage with Shadow Ball, with that Life Orb boost. And that's, I mean, one of the big things that kind of rocketed it into discussion for something like a suspect test right now. Because when you're looking at the strongest things on HO right now, there's a few contenders. Gouging Fire has some shooters. I don't see it. Roaring Moon is also really strong. I actually have a comparison I want to make to that later. But we'll get there. Roaring Moon is really strong. wasn't on the last survey, but it was brought up by some people in the comments. It's been brought up in forum posts and stuff. It's been part of the discussion. HO has a lot of things. Spectrier has kind of been pinned as the thing that's able to spiral games out of control the most. And I just kind of want to go over, as you can see here, I have Samurott, Arachnid, and Grimmsnarl in here. Those aren't Spectrier. I think that's obvious, but who knows? Maybe some visual assistance, well, not visual, guided assistance in the visual cues here might help people. And first I want to touch on Samurott. This is kind of the main, I guess, HO lead that we're working with right now. If you want to give some of your thoughts on that, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, same as spikes, you can't block the spikes from going up, which is what makes it so strong. Personally, I don't think Spectrier is fantastic on this style because you don't actually get any value. Like, Spectrier itself is not really benefiting from the spikes that Sammy lays down, as most of the things that are checking Spectrier are either already faster than it,
Yeah.
so the spikes don't do anything, or bulkier and running boots,
Yeah.
because RC Start is not a check. So like you really don't have much value. However, Simic Spikes is probably the best form of HO in the tier, and you can't go wrong with a Pokemon like Spectrier on this style of team. Even if I personally don't
Yeah.
think it's very good, it's fast, it's strong, it can take over games if not accounted for properly. So
Yeah,
that's
and I
my
mean,
thoughts on it, at
I
least.
think what's it? And I think the biggest benefit that Spectre has on Samurott HO, I think, is the fact that I didn't include the game where this was relevant just because it was potentially relevant and then it got crit. But bulky Arceus, so just 252 in HP. If you get 3 layers of spikes up, a +2 Spectre is super favored to get that kill with Shadow Ball. That's assuming it doesn't click Terra Normal, or that it's just not Terra Normal. Maybe it's like a CM set or something. But I think that is, in my opinion, kind of what attracts people a lot to Spectre and styles. Both with some of those roles giving it a chance to break a bit early for something else, or being able to use that chip for late game cleaning. Now, I think this is a good spot to start talking about some of Spectre's other like issues in the speed control department, which we'll cover more when we get to webs. But we can go back here and see Spectre
Yeah.
still doesn't have the best physical bulk. His physical Scarfers are like the most common Scarfers we have in a tier right now, and you're weak to a lot of priority.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that the two best priority mods in the tier right now, being Dragonite and Arceus, tend to Terra into normal types,
Yeah.
which means Spectre is clicking a significantly weaker move if it doesn't want to Terra itself and become vulnerable to the E-speeds that they're clicking. So
Yeah.
there's there's some issues with revenge killing, especially off of webs. And if we wanted to go over to Arachnid right now, um, webs is where Spectrier really does shine. Like, this is where
This
it is the
is,
best
yeah.
because not only does it get value off of blocking spins now from stuff like Terapagos, or even more offensive spinners like Great Tusk or Iron Treads, if either of those can manage to fit it. Um, but it's also now a lot of its speed control problems are limited to just speed ties with Mewtwo and priority. Um,
Yeah.
which is what makes Spectrier, I think, just an auto include on any webs team that wants to be viable, even more than something like Gold Dango, because even though Gold can block Defog, if you're only going to be trying to fit one ghost type on your team, it is significantly better to have that be Spectrier because of the fact that now it can actually get its steamroll going a lot easier,
Yeah.
and once it comes in and gets that first kill, it's going to be a lot harder to come back and like revenge kill it because there's just frankly nothing in the tier that's going to outspeed it and kill it.
And with something as volatile as webs can be, um, the nice thing is that like even if it's a more offensive spinner, these kinds of matchups with like how a lot of people are building webs right now, with how I'm building webs right now, things like Arceus Ice, Gouging Fire being pretty decent on these structures. I don't mind like even using Spectrier as like a, okay, you come in trying to block the spin, you take a ton of damage, and you do a little bit in return to set up for something else. Like that's a fine thing. It just gives it so much diversity of like how it can support a webs team and help make that progress throughout the game to give them a better chance. And I mean, we're going to see examples of this across all of HO that, I mean, if you can't tell already, by our shining review of Spectrier on Spike's offense, we both are kind of leaning towards the Spectrier is not bannable side. I'll get that out there.
Oh, spoiling the fun.
I am gonna spoil the fun. But
Yeah, but in general, I
mm,
think, but yeah, in general, webs is where Spectrier is the
mhm,
strongest out of any of the HO types,
yeah,
and
'cause I mean we have our
webs, well, they're very
yeah,
strong, but like
they're not great right now.
they definitely have hit or miss, especially into priority.
Especially to priority, and right now,
Stuff like E-killers
and
and
a lot of balance is starting to make a shift towards Defog Giratina, Rapid Spin like a lot more bulky Rapid Spin Terapagoses that can really punish the webs that choose to drop Gholdengo, because it then becomes a long-term game of trying to keep the webs up. And I mean, I think what's it, Araquanid is currently like tiered B in the viability rankings, B minus, something like that, maybe B plus, I don't know. Whatever, it's in that B range, and it's like it's fine. But I mean that's what I think when I say webs are volatile, both for the person using them, like in terms of how they can just like spiral a game completely out of control for the person using them, or just not be as much of a factor as you want them. Because like balanced teams, they're naturally really slow right now. They're focusing on things like E-killer for their priority, or something that's really damning for a lot of webs teams that are popular right now is the fact that Scarf Landorus is still stubbornly sticking around, even if it's probably not. It's not remotely close to Landorus's best set. It exists. Um,
I mean, Landorus in general was a massive pain in the ass for webs.
yeah, and I mean that's always gonna stick
You can't
around.
switch into
Yeah.
like yeah. Moving
Mm,
on to
yeah.
screens.
Actually, no. I'm gonna add one more. I'm gonna add one more thing
Screens.
because sorry to interrupt you. I'm gonna add one more thing because we did mention Dragonite earlier, and Dragonite's a much newer innovation. Um, it mostly started by you. I mean, people were running it before, but like the spamming of it that's gotten it to be like recognized as a really potent threat on HO right now. It's mostly been started by you, and it also existing more often. Um, Also can give Webs some grief because it's just another Webs immune Pokemon. Boots Mewtwo too. It's like lots to consider. Anyway, you wanted to
Yeah,
speak about screens.
yeah. So for screens, I think this is definitely Spectrier's second best style, as getting a Spectrier behind screens setting up
Hmm.
is really, really difficult to deal with because
Hmm.
now it can actually leverage like its bulk, which is previously been mentioned to not be great, but now it can
Hmm.
leverage that into setting up two nasty plots instead of one, and being able to like safely taunt or sub
Yeah.
or wisp revenge killing opportunities
Like the healing you
behind
get
the
from Draining
screens.
Kiss is crazy when this thing gets going.
And that also makes it a lot harder to deal with behind screens. However, screens themselves aren't the greatest playstyle right now. It's hard to find things that really work, although Spectre
Mhm.
is one of their better abusers
Oh,
currently.
for sure. And I mean, I like want to mention I've seen all of these different HO styles drop Spectre, even webs. I mean I personally I know in week 6 of UUFPL, ran a Spectrierless webs that was Araquanid, Golden Go, Arceus Ice, Gouging Fire, Dragonite, and I forget the last one. Oh no, Boots Mewtwo. That's it.
Was that
It's still
me?
what?
Was that me? Did I load that? Some
I think
shit.
you also loaded something like that. I think well, I mean, I think you loaded that versus. Did you load that versus Ocean? No, I think you put a Spectre on that. I don't know. You approved that one, and uh, I don't care what Frito will say. She approved some teams that she will not stand by. She approved that Spectrialist webs. So you know. Anyways, the last thing to touch on here, just because it's kind of the other one that just kind of exists in people's consciousness that isn't like specific to a few players. I mean, it's not been common in tour play as much recently, but I've seen it a few times. I've seen it more than I've seen the other sets on ladder um, right now, and it was something that was kind of being carried over from being one of Spectre's viable options in Zacian meta, which is the Scarf set. So pretty simple. This Terra can be fighting. You can drop that Draining Kiss for another support move. You can like Will-O-Wisp and Hex. Like you have options. It's not the best, but like it can steamroll when it gets going. It's a win con that can be a bit scary, but it still suffers with the same issues that we mentioned before, mostly even more with priority and the fact that you struggle to break, which I think that's another thing that people are really taking into consideration when talking about Spectre being broken right now, is its ability to break through things, which I think brings us pretty well to our first replay. Frito, look who it is. It's you. Uh,
Mm,
this
okay,
one's
sure.
This one's this one's from week 2 of UUFPL. Frito versus Kapperajah. Um, and okay,
This
so
was pre-Mewtwo drop,
this
for the
was before me
record.
too. This was, um, but it is also still not out of the realm of possibility to see a matchup like this nowadays. Um, it's not as common, but it exists. Anyways, but my preamble for this, I went through looking for replays, trying to find as many replays as I could that in recent tour play, this being UUFPL, UMBD, and Super Bowl. I UUFPL and UMBD are both done, so I have all of those to look through, and Super Bowl is ongoing, but the amount of games we're getting now is a lot less. And I was looking for Spectrier sweeps, and I found 3. 2 of them we're going to look over. One of them only happened because of a crit. And it was quite likely going to be Spectrier trading and enabling something else on the team.
Yeah, and I would also like to point out that this game should be taken with a pretty massive grain of
Yeah.
salt, as my opponent was
Hmm.
subbed in at the last minute, as someone did not show up for their game that they
Yeah.
scheduled with me. So
Yeah.
this person, I believe, had no experience in the tier and was just thrown in, so
Hmm.
they didn't take an act loss at the last second. So that is something to keep in mind around my opponent's play, because I know I didn't play this game
Yeah.
very well.
We'll just start it at a normal speed. We have like pretty classic. You what?
Yep. Yeah, I was saying I didn't
Yeah.
really need to have to play well.
Yeah.
So the
Oh, for
gear
sure.
comes in.
Pretty classic. Rock when it just trying to slow everything down. It's like gear coming in, you can kind of assume that it's defog. Um, or something of the sort.
Yeah.
But it just goes for the Will-O-Wisp here. Uh, I mean, this is a nice thing about just Goldango on webs. It
I'm a big
just
fan
is
of
so cool.
yeah, I am a very big fan
Hmm.
of Double Ghost on webs. So that is an
Oh,
assault
so right.
Samurott, which is supposed to be like the I assume Spectrier
Hmm.
counterplay, but I've brought in SD Samurott
Yeah, this is so fun.
because it is very, very strong. So I break the Lugia's sturdy data arrow
Mm,
or multi-scale data arrow blast
yeah,
for
and
it.
here we go.
But
This
now
and this,
into Spectrier.
yeah, and this is kind of like this team kind of at a glance isn't the best matchup. I mean, realistically, what should have come in here was the Garganackle. If you're gonna hard switch into anything, um, because
Mm-hmm.
Spadef Garganackle doesn't have the best Spectrier matchup, but something that you can see it do is you can see it when it comes in early, you can force Spectrier to Terra. Because Spectrier really only starts to threaten it after that second nasty plot, I find. Um,
And you also have to. It also gets to Salt here, chip it down as well.
yeah.
So
So if you get to force it to Terra by switching in early, and then getting that Sulcure chip, it can put you in a pretty good spot to prevent it with this presumed E-Killer, for example. So this is a bit of a somewhat questionable play. But it still forces the Terra Fairy, but now you get this extra plot coming off. And you're going to see that this game's now in a pretty dire spot with the Liga going down. And now it's like, I think the Garganackle comes in now. And this is still, you're going to see, this still doesn't do too much damage. Like, that's the crazy thing. I think Draining Kiss is doing 60 there.
yeah, because Life Orb got knocked off.
Yeah, it's still crazy.
Probably, yeah, but there's also no
Mhm.
point in over predicting
Oh,
at
yeah,
this
for
point in
sure.
case it's something stupid like Terra Poison.
Yeah, you never
Just
know.
get the damage and then because it's going to be winning the game from this
Mhm.
position regardless.
Yeah, you can also see this is again life orb's gone, but this is why Garganackle tends to be the good like reflex check to a Spectre like this because even when it's got this many boosts, the Draining Kiss I don't like even with Life Orb I think the Draining Kiss still is coming close to killing but doesn't one shot at this point. Um, and I mean you're seeing Garganackle take this much damage. That's why it's kind of what you see be the hard switch in first. But even then, with Terra Fairy coming into the picture, you still don't see it be a consistent 1v1 check. It's always relying on something else in a more direct matchup like this. Um, but at this point, there's nothing really that can be done. The Draining Kiss is going to restore back to full health. We see the Magirna come in an attempt. And I mean, we know like this game's basically over. Garganackle's
Shadow Ball
dead.
is just gonna knock.
Shadow Ball's gonna kill
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So that game's done. But this is kind
Yeah,
of.
so like this is what people
Mhm,
think of when they think of Spectrier like sweeping. However, I'm gonna be
mhm.
completely honest, this team was woefully underprepared for Spectrier actually clicking the Terra button.
Yeah.
Um, as there was really no answer to Spectrier after it had Terra'd. Like sure,
Mhm.
yeah, like Samu and Garg can take it on, like pre-Terra, but after that Terra button has been clicked, both of those are going to be losing the 1v1, and there's
Yeah.
no speed control here to actually outspeed the Spectrier after that point.
Mhm.
So it's kind of just going to get to go to town and steamroll. So I think this is more of my opponent brought a very bad team,
Mhm.
rather than Spectrier is showing what is really broken because
Yeah.
there was not a single mon on that team that is just faster than Spectrier anyways. So I have no idea what
Mhm.
this idea was into something like a Deoxys or even Iron Bundle because Iron Bundle is legal and most honestly most
Mhm.
Dragon Dancers or Scarfers give
Yeah.
this team a lot of problems. So
And that's the thing that's
again,
been
this
talked
replay
about.
needs to be taken with a
Yeah.
massive grain of salt as my
Yeah.
opponent had like 0
And it's still. I mean,
uh
I still think it's something worth talking about, just in terms of how much do we think Spectre impacts the builder. I think this is a good example of uh, where someone didn't take that into account, because I'm coming from the perspective of, well, clearly, as we see in this replay, you do need to take Spectre into account in the builder. You need to like put some thought into it. But I also don't think it's something that needs to be taken specifically into account. As you can see here, I mean, this replay, there's no speed control, um, like at all. Um, like any of those things. I mean, as you said, half the Dragon Dancers in the tier at a glance are at the very best case scenario for the team we're looking at here, forcing a Giratina to Terra, and then pray that you get another day to breathe, because you just don't have those options. And I think that's something that a lot of people, because Spectre has a really good speed tier. No, like don't get me wrong, but I think some people are missing like kind of the inherent ways you should be approaching speed control. Because Spectre isn't speed control itself unless your opponent doesn't bring any. I think is a kind of a key takeaway. It's really fast, but a lot of the speed control in this tier should reasonably be able to give it some grief. Because, for example, if this is an E-Killer Arceus, another thing, if you don't want to switch into Garganacl that early because you're like, oh, I feel like it's going to be able to handle something else. I don't think it does, but you harden to that E-Killer, you can click the Terra button pretty early and sort of force the Spectrier to kind of have to manage that. It's like there are ways. This team didn't have any, but again, this is kind of what people think about when they're thinking of Spectrier being overbearing, being able to run through teams, winning that Garganacl 1v1, yeah, things like that. So I kind of wanted to get that out of the way as like, here's our most egregious, spelled with an E, because I make that mistake a lot, egregious example of Spectrier just being able to tear through an underprepared team. That doesn't kind of come in with, again, this is coming from us as like more recently successful players, with Frito being successful for a long time and me kind of like really starting to pick up pace. But it's like the effects of what not having a strong team building can really make Spectrier seem really blown out of proportion because it is easy to not have those tools to handle it. I think that makes sense anyway. What do you think?
Yep.
Yep, alright.
I would agree.
Oh, we can pop on to our next one here. Ah, look at that, it's me. This is so when I was saying earlier that there are some teams that Frito refuses to stand by. She approved this team. We spent a decent amount of time talking about this one. Not only did you approve the Solgaleo, but you missed the serious-natured Arceus Poison. So
I
something
must
was
have
going
been
on.
under the influence of something.
Hey,
That's the only way that could happen.
well, as we're gonna see, it still wins, so... Grand Grim Days to Finals, we lost, but whatever. So anyways, we have actually an interesting example of Grimmsnarl screens here. Then let's start with our team analysis. Interesting example of Grimmsnarl screens. The Mewtwo, Arctic Poison, Spectre, Gouging Fire. Kind of expected, all Pokemon that can be greedy with that setup. Solgaleo's a bit of a shock, for sure. But seeing this, you can kind of assume its weakness policy, speed boosting, or whatever the set it runs is. Like, Rock Polish, does it get that? I think it does. Right?
What mon?
Yeah.
Solgaleo?
Solgaleo,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the only... It gets Agility and Rock Polish. Those are the only two boosting moves it gets in this generation.
Yeah, so you can kind of like assume it's that. So it's like this is a pretty good example of a team that would be able to like get this chance to set up. And at a glance, I mean, I don't know about you, this team looks like it has a pretty bad defensive matchup in the Spectrier. Like I have a Solgaleo, weak to Shadow Ball, Arc Poison.
Yeah,
I mean, we've talked about it.
Yeah,
We've talked about it, but it's like, it's definitely not what I
it's
want my
E-Killer,
best defensive...
so...
It's E-Killer, but it's not what I want my best defensive answer to be. I have a Landorus. I mean, one of my favorite Spectre calcs is actually going to come out in this game because of this Landorus. Roaring Moon, this is not Choice Scarf, this is Heavy Duty Boots, it is Dying, Giratina, it's Force to Terra. So basically, the name of the game here... it is a Scarf Samurai. Worst comes to worst, I have a way to revenge it because I have speed control, and I have two forms of it at that. But what's really gonna, I think, decide this game is something I knew from preview, was making sure I didn't give Spectrier any safe way to get that first plot. Because if it did get that and pretty much only that was where I was really gonna start to be in trouble here. as well as gouging fire and like all this stuff, but that's kind of to be expected. So let's start this. I miss every ceaseless edge, by the way. Every time I've played Medeia, I've missed a ceaseless edge.
Personally, that's just a skill issue, if you
Yeah,
ask me.
and okay, maybe a misplay. There's nothing really else in his team that wants to comfortably come in on this Grimmsnarl. So being confident in my ability to kind of long term hold out against the Spectrier and keep it from getting progress, I wanted to get that spike down, just so I could start getting as much residual chip as possible. And I mean, if Medeia was going to waste turns not getting up screens, it's not the best. I mean, it kind of sucks because I missed that first ceaseless edge. If I had 2 spikes here, I'm really happy. But it's a interesting start to this game for sure. And
I
this
would
kind of
like to
gives.
point out that getting 2 spikes later in the game would not have mattered if this Arceus was not serious nature. So,
Well, no, it didn't even
someone.
matter if it was serious nature because look, that did 52. Uh, and this is we get the benefit of running faster E-killers. I mean, that's a kind of debate that's happened for a bit. It's like how much speed do you run? So when I came into the tier, you were passing me 40 E-killers, and now I'm running like 120. Anyway, that's not
Let's
Spectrier.
not talk about E-Killer speed control. Let's talk about Spectrier, please.
Spectrier. I got my own Solgilios. We get to see the
Shut up.
Mewtwo. It's Life Orb. It's gonna do some damage. At this point, I don't particularly care about keeping my Solgaleo alive because I just need to kind of exert as much pressure as possible on this Mewtwo, just to make sure that again I can pick it off with something else. Go to Roaring Moon just because I know I can take this. I know I can take that Focus Blast. Medeia stays in. I get a bit
That
lucky
was
here.
where the spike. That was where the spike mattered.
Yeah. Um, Getting another spike would have been great there. I mean, Medeia stayed in. I get my vengeance for missing a ceaseless, but I mean, even if that doesn't happen, I can just go Arceus, and my Arceus is still in a good spot. Just being able to put a lot of pressure on this team. But anyways, this gives me the opportunity to go Landorus, because Landorus is just immediately going to threaten all of this. The spike being down means that Spectrier, because Spectrier is a role to take the Life Orb Earth power, without a spike down. With the spike down, it does guarantee that it's going to die. So really, the only option is to go Grimmsnarl here, and I get my plot, which is cool. And Sludge Wave just kills here. And then Spectrier comes in, and it's like, okay, if Spectrier is able to get this kill on Landorus, this isn't a bad position for Medeia.
No. But
Unfortunately,
is the
it can't
problem.
get that kill. This is kind of, I think, one of a few big factors about Spectrier that we're going to see, especially over these next few replays, is just how much Spectrier needs in place to kind of be as broken as it is, you know? Well, as people argue that it is. Because we see instances like this, where it's a Spectrier behind a screen versus a relatively frail attacker. I mean, Landorus isn't super frail, but it's pretty frail. But because it can't safely get that turn of setup, all it's going to be here is a potential chance to make progress. And try and force a damage trade by putting my Landorus into Arceus Poison range, assuming it's E-Killer. And that's kind of like, it tries. I go for the Earth Power because if the E-Speed comes out, I'm in a pretty happy spot because I still have the rest of my team. And I'm Terra Ghost, so this game is just over. This is... I feel like this game is very representative of something I see of Spectre a lot. Or it's not able to get that initial
Where it
OHKO.
does 80%. Where it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where it does 80% and then proceeds to die back because it has
Yeah.
terrible bulk.
I mean, the Arceus Calc is a good example because a +2 Spectre, and this is what I love to send to people, a +2 Spectre Life Orb is doing 85% max to a 252 HP Arceus. You need a +3 to have a roll to kill. And that just shows like what you need going on for Spectrier for it to be able to actually get that break. And my argument of this is not that Spectrier is not good. I think firmly Spectrier is like an A+ mono tier right now. It's really good on HO. But this is where I think we start to see the more healthy aspects of Spectrier as a Pokemon on HO, functioning as we expect other HO Pokemon to. Because the most important thing, if you're on an HO team, is either maintaining that trade war or making sure that if you're not being able to keep that momentum up, that you're setting yourself up to like break through a whole bunch of things in one go. And I mean, where we're going to see a little bit of that later, and kind of the other side of the wheel where that little bit of damage from Spectrier actually does help. And I think in this case, it's something I would compare to, I think what I see more often, Gouging Fire function on HO right now, where it definitely threatens the sweep, but more often than not, Gouging Fire is kind of forced to trade. Just because it has the bulk to take those boosted hits, opposed to Spectrier, where it can come in, stop something from setup, and do damage. Gouging Fire has the bulk to take a hit of something that's set up. Maybe it has to invest Terra, but it can take a hit and kill something back. And it can kind of even those odds a little bit. And again, Spectrier is the opposite side of that coin, but that's something that we've come to expect of the more consistent pieces of HO, that people kind of tout as like, this is what's making the playstyle really fun to play right now, as well as it just being good. Is that something you agree on?
Yep.
Fine. I feel like I'm talking too much. Like, you can take over if you want. Look, it's Shiloh and Exiline.
You're a yapper. I mean, there's no reason. Oh boy, Shiloh loaded team. So this is the same team from the first replay that we watched.
Yeah.
Shiloh loaded this probably because I forgot to pass him a team. Oops, that's my bad. Oopsie.
We have
I was pretty bad about passing him teams, so Shiloh, if you watch this, I'm sorry. So yes, and then we have Exiline's team, which is, I believe, Ewan, made by
this
Ewan.
has Ewan all over it. I mean, this guy was loving Orthworm Shedtail with Mimikyu for a while, I feel like.
Yep.
So it's like we got two good builders.
So I mean,
here, good players. Interesting matchup.
On preview, it looks like the Shiloh Spectrier has a fairly strong matchup into this. However, between Mimikyu with the red card, because yes, it is red carded, and the Regieleki with Volt Switch, Spectrier really has a hard time getting going. And that's not to mention that Orthworm could pass a sub to something if it gets a predict right. So it's like it's like a good matchup in theory for Shiloh Spectrier, but it's gonna find a hard time making progress. Where on the other side of the coin, it is double ghost webs, but that does require the webs to be kept up for Exiline Spectrier to really do a lot of damage in this game.
Yeah, like I think this one was a really interesting matchup because we have two Spectres that are kind of focusing on different ways to enable them. I mean, the big question of this game was going to be how, like, can Shiloh keep webs up, period. And I think that was always going to be the thing because the big risk is if the webs go down, Shiloh's game now kind of hinges on a Spectrier speed tie, which is like 50-50 odds are cool, but it's like your speed control options have now kind of fizzled out, and into this matchup, you have to count on kind of the Spectrier speed tie if you want to win that 1v1, which might happen at one point, and you might have to deal with the fact that there's a sub up, that there's a Mimikyu that's going to be able to revenge you pretty comfortably if you lose it. So it's going to be really interesting to see this game play out, and that's part of why I picked it. I mean, this is from the Super Bowl, and I think we've seen a bit of unfair
Two very
comments.
good clickers too.
Yeah, we've seen some unfair comments, I think, made about the strength of some of the invited players, just because they don't know the tier. But I think this replay like shows very well how, even though they're not mainers of the tier, it's really interesting to see people who are just this good at the game duke it out and see how they approach it. So yeah, let's get started. So yeah, obviously, Araquanid coming in, Roaring Moon coming in here is an interesting one. And this is, I think, what's this Fizz
It's not
dev?
going to kill,
Yeah.
and webs go up.
Webs go up. Now it's just a matter of can you keep them up?
That's so
Outrage.
outrage for outrage.
This is kind of,
this means webs will go down here.
So now it's gonna come down to
subs. I think now in Shiloh's defense, it was a roll to so he kind of had to go for outrage after he clicked Dragonite there. So it's I'm gonna ignore the not citrus berry earthworm. However, what I was saying was like I don't remember either, but like it doesn't matter. He was in a tough position there because if he Dragon Dances and dies, he's now forced to go into another Mon and Terra immediately. And now he's lost 2 Pokemon to this versus losing his webs, which I talked to him about this after the game. I think he realizes he should have gone something else because protecting his webs was more important for how this game is going to play out. However, this was just, I can understand it was about a 50-50 roll if he would die to outrage. So he just took that and tried to eliminate what was the biggest threat to his team almost immediately.
I'm actually going to double check something because this is a cog I keep forgetting. Roaring Moon. I'm checking this on my phone. Yeah, so here's another notable thing about the Spectrier Roaring Moon interaction. I mean, some people are probably going to be thinking, why don't you just go Spectrier into that Roaring Moon? So here's the problem. If you don't Terra, Spectrier's Raining Kiss is not a guaranteed kill. It is an 87 to 10. It is an 87 to 103% roll.
The other thing is, right, like even if you come in Terra and then plot on the Roaring Moon, like you're still now risking, like you have to predict the fact that it's gonna Terra and not be sacked because Shadow Ball won't kill it. If it doesn't Terra, or if it does Terra, Dragon Kiss is also not going to kill it. So now you're playing games of like, what's going on here? And then if it decides to stay in and then Dragon Dance because it doesn't get confused from the outrage into the Terra Fairy, the game is over. So regardless, like I understand Shiloh is in a pretty shitty position here. Like we talked about it after the game.
Yeah, and you can't go for a Spectre. So. You can't go for a Spectre setup there because there's a Mimikyu. You're not. You're getting your progress halted so strongly, and at this point, we're looking at like any of these other mons getting hit by a curse, a potential curse, or a Will-O-Wisp. None of those are good for any of those. Or if the Mimikyu does start to attack, it's not great either. So it's just a rough position. I mean, we do have a glimmer of hope for Shiloh, with the Shed Tail not being able to go off for it. I don't know why it's not citrus. But this kind of is where we see, I think, Shiloh gets back into the game a little bit.
That is an unfortunate miss, but it doesn't really matter because the Poison CS comes in. Again, I believe this is DD. Yes. So
and we're really trying to make sure that the Spectre doesn't
it's slower
come in
than the Alecki, so all his spikes are going to go down, but he can just Dragon Dance again.
And now the Mimikyu
before the red
coming in.
Burn from the Mimikyu.
So we can finally pop this red card, which is kind of really, really good. And Goldengo is honestly kind of the best thing that could be pulled in here. Being able to take that Shadow Sneak and just come back and kill.
Because Goldengo is... Now
God.
Aleki's gonna come back out and Volt again.
Yep.
Very, very like standard, but now the game is
Yep.
coming down to Spectrier versus the opposing Spectrier for a speed tie.
Yeah.
Ice Beam is going to Terra Fairy and Draining Kiss,
It
which
just
is the right
brings
play
you
here. He's
back
trying
to
to get back
full.
as much HP as possible
This was
for the opposing Spectrier here.
it's not the best play. I think sacking. You're gonna have to sack something, but whatever. Now it comes down to the speed
It
tie.
doesn't. It doesn't really.
Yeah.
That one gets because the problem there, you have to sack something anyways, and
Yeah.
you just sack the thing that gave it back less health.
Yeah.
Because now there is no super effective move to click into the
Yeah.
opposing Spectrier.
And I
So
mean, like that's
like
and I
again,
think
I think he made the show moment. Like
yeah.
the
And I
game
mean
came down to a speed tie.
that's another thing. I think that's kind of like, is this something people are willing to deal with? Because speed tests can be really contentious. I know that was something that was brought up a lot during the Zacian suspect. Do people want to deal with speed ties with their Spectrier? And I don't particularly think that's something that's super crazy. Is like,
I mean, I don't actually see them as very common. Speed ties are not as common in this tier as something like Ubers.
yeah, for sure.
So it's not really as big of a problem. It's not like the
I agree.
Zacian speed ties, which dictated entire games.
Yeah. It's
Like the Spectrier ties, while they're annoying, they're actually fairly rare.
Yeah, and I also see it kind of, again, as just like another thing to consider, because I I'm surprised I haven't mentioned this in this video, because this is present in basically every other argument I've made about Spectrier so far, like everywhere else on this website. But I think the big thing about handling Spectrier, as is with any HO mod, mind you, is analyzing the matchup that you got, figuring out how you need to manage your resources to best handle the biggest threats to your team. Some teams are going to have more ways to handle something than others. It's like a team that has E-Killer, Terapagos, maybe someone's decided to bring back Mental Herb, T-Wave, Magirna, and Choice Scarf Urshifu Rapid, is not going to have to worry as much about Spectrier as it might have to worry about a Roaring Moon, or maybe it's really not looking happy into that CM Terra Ground Arceus Ice on the same team. So you just have to like look at that and decide, hey, how am I going to handle this? And try and maximize your odds of doing that. And with how rare the speed tie is, I mean, sometimes obviously it's relevant. And I wanted to include this here because, I mean, it does show up sometimes. I think for Spectre, in Spectre's case, it's much more of a balancing act, because we have much more tools to kind of look at how do we manage the Spectre in the long game. HO, it's just about getting that speed advantage as soon as you can, on taking advantage of the fact that it doesn't do much damage unboosted. It does a lot, but it doesn't do as much as it needs to, and stop it from getting set up in the first place, with the speed tie as like a backup, if something doesn't go your way. So this is just something I find interesting personally. I don't know what your thoughts on that specifically are. I know you agree to a point, but
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is it's just HO. Like the problem with this meta is that we're suspect testing an HO1, and HO has a lot of variance. Unfortunately, that's kind of just the nature of it, right? Like I can most of what I would say is just kind of egotistical skill issue. Like I really never have problems with Spectrier when I'm playing against it, so like build a better team. However, a lot of these people are using my team, so maybe I need to build a better team sometime. Anyways, I think a lot of it comes down to people are not really trying to like they're thinking too much about like how to actually counter Spectrier instead of or like, instead of actually building a good team that
Well,
will
if they were
net.
trying to counter Spectrier, we'd see people actually liking the
So,
Spidef Terapagos sets. But
well, yeah, and instead we're the only two people that load that, but or we'll see, or we would see
Bacon loads it.
more
Bacon and FC load it.
which we
They're
saw
good.
in Super Bowl, yeah,
Bacon.
which we saw in Super Bowl, but people
I
would
got my
load
I get my bacon
more
glaze in.
Alolan
Let's
Muck
go.
if yeah, uh, if that was something that they were truly, really concerned
Mhm.
about.
Where I
Because it
feel
also
like,
just sits on most other ghost types in the tier
yeah,
anyways, so
I feel like, because I feel like the argument that I'm seeing a lot is a lot of people, um, saying that it's like this kind of nebulous status quo of I should be able to build this way and not lose to Spectre. Which I don't think is always the case. It's like is tier because when you think of the because again we have to consider both ladder and tour play right now. But I think it's a big dichotomy right now because you look at tour play again, as I mentioned earlier, I struggled finding replays for this. Um, it took me, I mean, Frito can attest to this because I was updating a little pinned message in our DMs over the course of like 2 days while I was like looking over the same replay threads over and over and over again, um, trying to find replays to go for this because it's not been an issue as much in tour play right now. We're seeing a lot of those adaptions start popping up. We're seeing Spadaf Terapagos, we're seeing Scarfers, we're seeing people be able to keep the Spectre on its toes um, and like force it to not be able to get spiraling out of control. Where the case is very different on ladder. Um, and I think that's interesting. And I think as maybe rude or disrespectful as it sounds, I think to an extent there is some form of skill issuing happening, where it's kind of people expecting to be able to load the same shed tail, the same webs, and I'm going to load 4 life orb mons that hit hard. That started to really come up after Zacian's ban, and as Spectre has risen up, those teams don't feel like they've adapted the right way. Like I'm not seeing another thing is like on webs teams. I did my suspect run recently. I saw a lot of webs. I did not see much red card or Rockwooded, which is something that I feel like is a very good countermeasure to a lot of the HO we're seeing because it just gets you that early. I'm not going to let you get as much progress. Or putting on things like I'm going to put on Aspidef Roar Terapagos on my HO team. And it's just stop you from making progress or something. I mean, we've seen Mimikyu catch on, but I don't think Mimikyu's that amazing on anything outside of webs. So it's I think this is one of the most noticeable gaps I've seen in something like this. So thank you for bringing that up. I'm gonna take a sip of my drink.
yep. Let's go on to the next replay.
Let's do it. Baddy versus Shadow. I chose this one because I mean, something we've seen again. We're seeing a more bulky team. We got that Garganackle, and then we're seeing again a relatively standard webs. And this is one, and I'm gonna spoil the ending. We see the Spectre win here, and this is one where I want to commend Baddy for resource management. Because you're looking at this team, you're immediately seeing the fact that there's a Deoxys that outspeeds. That Corviknight's gonna have defog. That Giratina might have defog. Keeping webs up is going to be a bit of a challenge during this game. You have a Deoxys that if it gets on the field, it's faster than everything here and has ways to kill pretty much all of it. I think that's an E-killer based on how Shadow likes to build. And there's a Spidef Garganackle that's going to be able to put Spectre in a spot where it might be forced to trade instead of sweep. So I think this replay, more than some of the other ones I've shown here, I think just shows how valuable, in terms of making Spectre like the standout game plan of your team, how valuable understanding what your opponent has to manage instead of trying to force your Spectrier in to win as soon as possible. Because there's been some discussion kind of going parallel to this on Roaring Moon in both the Discord and the forums. And I would see some replays discussed where it's like, well, this wasn't a great game for Roaring Moon because when it came in here, it didn't sweep. And it didn't have to. Didn't have to sweep. Maybe it could have been saved for later, but Roaring Moon in that case would have been a good choice to like, okay, I'm going to reclaim some progress here. And I mean, the last replay we're going to see shows that being done really well with Spectrier. Where this is one where it's like, okay, I know what my win con is, so I'm going to use the rest of my tools to bludgeon the team into submission. So let's start this. Anyways, you can give your thoughts for this. I just yapped a lot, as I do.
Yeah. Good red card pull there. I mean, the core really isn't going to be getting a lot done here. So fun fact, liquidation. Sticky web can actually be PP stalled by pressure, so the Iraq Wounded will win this interaction by just clicking sticky web over and over again. Now, granted, the Corviknight will end up at full because of that, but I think you'll take that over the web slowing
And I mean,
down.
Baddy ends up
However,
deciding to do this, but I think it's piloted in such a way that lets webs get back up later. Yeah, exactly. Ogrepon. I mean,
you can set them versus
cool.
guard.
Rock Tomb. Where's our Rock Tomb Ogreponers? Taunt Ogrepon is actually so funny. I love that. That's another thing that makes this matchup kind of sucky. T-Wave Giratina into webs can actually be a pretty severe problem. Because it just kind of, again, flips that speed control on your head. And in here we have a really nice switch, just letting those webs get right back up. Sure, you're taking the rocks, but like, who cares at this point? I mean, at this point, you're mildly worried that this like could be a defog Tina, so we're gonna see that. But it ends up clicking Draco, so you're like, okay, it's probably not. Roaring Moon comes in. Roaring Moon, very good, very strong. It's gonna be able to just knock off that Tina because of the defense drop. And Deoxys, I forget, is this, I think this might be the CD Deoxys team that Ewan made, or some variant of that. We see Spectre hit the field the first time.
I believe so, yes.
Switch out. Because at this point, that's another thing, the Garganackle and Arceus can't, like, combine those two together, can definitely still be a problem if that chip hasn't been done. Ice Beam, we now know this is a CM arc, and it doesn't even kill the Ogrepon. So at this point, the Spectre only really has to worry about the Garganackle, and as we've discussed, that's a favorable matchup for the Spectre. And when it can
especially because it's not taking the chip from the rocks here.
Yeah.
So it's gonna get all three plots off here.
And it's not gonna do much damage because it's not Life Orb, it's Boots. However, because it's kind of being able to negate as much chip damage as possible, it's just going to put this Garganackle in a really terrible position where it's not actually going to be able to hold out this endgame long enough for the Deoxys to come in, because there's really no pressure for the Spectrier to click Terra Fairy here, because you don't have to break the Garg as soon as possible. If it dies, you win. So this is, I think, just a really good show of just really good play from
well
Baddy.
Played Spectrier.
Yeah, Baddy played this game really well and kind of didn't give Shadow any outs.
Another team that is woefully prepared for Spectrier.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that was
a bit unfortunate,
maybe, but it's still rough.
Yeah, if it was E-Killer instead of CP Deoxys, then yeah, like this could have been a lot better for Shadow. However, that was not the way the team was built, so oh well, it happens.
Yeah, so it's like, again, I don't, because I would see, in the way people talk about replays, I would see something like this pointed to as this Spectrier had no ways to beat it in the end game. But then I ask you, how many times do we see that in HO? How many times do we see someone make one, like, fumble their Terra on their Giratina a bit early, all of a sudden, this Gouging Fire can get up one Dragon Dance and win. Like, with pretty much nothing to beat it. It's something that's pretty common in HO in any tier right now, because Gen 9 is just like this, and you could argue it's the same of HO in previous gens as well, because they're built to be punishing of these kinds of mistakes. So it's nebulous. Do you think that's too much of an issue? Again, I think Spectrier has some broken aspects to it, but I don't think, especially looking at replays like this, I don't think it's completely, like, overwhelmingly stupid. Anyways, we got one more.
Yeah, and I would tend to agree.
Yeah.
Like it actually wasn't doing very much damage, but like, oh well. It happens.
Yeah. Right, and it's just, what are you saving to try and handle it? What are you not saving to try and handle it? I mean, I think that, if nothing else, that game shows... Oh yeah, Nunes. Yes, this is Frito versus T Nunes in UMBD, I think week 4. We'll get to this in a second. I think it just also shows how dangerous relying on your Garganackle to beat a Spectre when you don't have any speed control to pair with it is something you should be... and it's less consideration for team building into Spectrier, and consideration when you're building with a Garganackle, because that invites certain weaknesses. There's a reason this Pokemon isn't like super high up on the A tier, even though it has defined strength right now, just because with how quote-unquote passive it is, even if it does do a lot of chip damage, it can open up certain holes in your building. I mean, that's an opinion we've also both share about Palafin. Frito and I kind of agree that while Palafin has really strong
Palafin is shit.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna get to that. Well, in theory, it has really good things. It's like a water priority move is very strong in this tier. There's a reason we didn't list it as one of the best priority uses in the tier. If you go way back, because I know there's someone who's already DM'd me saying, I can't believe you didn't mention Palafin as one of the better priority uses in this tier. Because, with the exception of one team made by
I have one word for you.
Palafin's bad.
I have one word for you.
Yeah.
No, hazards. That's why it's bad, because now you're being forced to run double hazard removal, which isn't very good. So, like, Rashi loaded a Mystic Water Palafin into me during UUFPL during the last week, which I think is probably your best set because it allows you to fake being banded pretty well, because you could just be low rolling with a band compared to Mystic Water, but then you can also fit something like Encore or Taunt to be more of a pain in the ass. Although I think Encore is like the only justification for using that set. However, it's like, even then, Kelvin is such a Parahog for like anything, and then it still can't break the dragons. So it's like, it's not really worth investing into, in my personal opinion.
And I mean, we have seen one team
I don't think it's very good. However, onto this game.
Yeah. One more thing about Palafin, because we have seen the Ewan's team be successful.
We're done talking about... Nope, we're done talking about Palafin. This is not a Palafin video. You want to make a Palafin video, we can do that later.
People who cannot see the video cameras right now that we have on in our voice call for each other, I have the biggest grin on my face, and Frito is currently scratching her head and like has her face held in her hands, tears streaming onto the bed, because I'm being so annoying right now.
Yeah, go. Nuh-uh. I am annoyed though, yes.
Let's get to this. I mean, T-Nudes for like this entire tour was just loading some fun cheese.
Poor guy was just getting thrown in. To be fair, he was ignoring FC, so like that's kind of I don't know where he was getting his teams from, but yeah. So like,
well, yeah, I feel like
Okay, sure.
This is giving Terra
Spectrier
building.
doesn't actually have that.
I don't know if Terra was on this team, but
Oh,
it's giving
okay,
Terra
well,
building.
Terra's not Brazilian. No. Um, However, Spectrier really, like, actually has a pretty good matchup into this team
Mm-hmm.
if it can manage to get going, given that it outspeeds literally everything on the team. Um, Although it is probably E-Killer,
Yep.
and it actually doesn't OHKO anything.
Mm-hmm. So
So,
you're
yeah.
gonna, yeah.
However,
So
this is a team that was not really built around Spectrier, it was kinda just thrown on at the end.
yeah, like this is. I mean, this team's now the kind of sample, right? Like this is priority spam. Um,
Yeah, this is my prior spam sample.
yeah. That was like with the that lead deoxys.
This was,
Ceaseless
like, the
edge
4th
missing.
game in a
Ass
row that I had
move.
loaded a Dragon Knight.
Yeah, and
I mean,
D-Night
it doesn't
spam.
really like, it's
Frito
annoying, but
special.
yeah, this was,
Yeah.
like, the 4th week in a row that I have loaded a D-Night,
And then I mean,
in between FPL and the
I proceeded to then like take one break week and then load it like 3 times in a row myself. So I carried on your torch.
so I Dragon Dance here, I know I'm gonna get encored, it doesn't really matter. Like, I admitted this
Whatever.
in my own, like, FPL recap, video, like, I
It's just
misplayed this
crazy.
here because really I
Mhm,
should have just Terra'd and won the game on the spot with the Dragonite because nothing could have
mhm,
stopped it at this point. However, I did misplay, and it's going to end up eating an
mhm.
Arrow Blast of that,
Yeah.
which wasn't my finest moment. And again, like,
Mhm.
I'm willing to admit when I've fucked up and misplayed. So
Yeah.
RC is going to come in because I took the damage. I can't
Mhm.
actually live anything, even if I Terra, so I
I
just
forgot
go
it
for
was
damage.
Dragon Claw.
Now at this point, I believe, yeah. So now Spectre is coming in because it's Dragon
Yeah.
Dance.
Yep.
Um, he makes a
Okay.
good play to just stack the Samu to
Yeah.
try to get momentum here. He's gonna go into
Mhm.
Roaring Moon. However,
Yeah.
uh, the Terra here is so blatantly obvious because he doesn't have the role to live,
Mhm.
because of the 2 layers of hazards.
Mhm.
So I'm just gonna taunt him and then sack the
Yeah.
Spectre because that is the most value I'm gonna get from it
Yeah.
at this point in the
I
game.
mean, this replay like in itself because okay, we're gonna put the Dragonite aside. We're gonna ignore that. The Dragonite no longer exists. Um, I'm going to just brush it all away. This, I think, is one of the best examples, I think, in this entire video of Spectre functioning the way you want an HO to function. Um, because, like, coming out of this, Frito's going to be down a Mon. Um, uh, and Spectre will still have put in the damage and stopped this Roaring Moon from setting up to keep Frito in this game. Because I think going for the sweep that Spectre is like known to do just wouldn't have worked here. There's no real safe way to do it. Where instead it gets to function as a good teammate and make sure that it is like being a part of kind of that HO flowchart per se, where sometimes you just have to like say, okay, I'm going to use this mod to get a taunt and some damage, and we're going to move on. And it's good because
Yeah,
it's setting up something else for the win. Just because Spectre isn't sweeping here doesn't mean it's not good,
it's also
but it,
just
yeah.
yeah. It's also limiting the biggest threat to my team because even though I have an E-Killer Arceus Electric in the back, I don't want to be relying on to like immediately Terra take 60% beyond 10% after the +1 Terra Ground Earthquake. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's actually just better for me to sack this Mon and go down in stacks and just accept the
Mm-hmm.
fact that my priority is going to win me the game in the end because
Yeah.
he doesn't have any of that.
And that's something I think that's really valuable out of Spectre, just because it can be that fast taunt. And it's something, I mean, even if, like, I agreed with the fact that it was broken, just across the board, which I don't, but even if I did, I think its fast taunt is really valuable on HO, because even if it can't get anything done, it is like just being a healthy part of that chain and keeping its team kind of ahead, even when it's not just using its offensive stuff. And it's not like Fast Taunt breaks it because there's other Pokemon that can do that. You can run Mewtwo, you can run a bundle with Encore. Like, you can
Cool.
run fast disruption stuff. I mean, what's it? FC recently loaded. Maybe not recently, but at one point was loading Bundle HO, I think. Someone was loading Bundle HO. I don't know. But it's like, tools like
Yeah.
that are always going to
He's
exist.
also loaded
Yeah.
Obi-Wan Peel.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's like, this is just an example of where I'm looking at this, and I'm like, yeah, okay, there probably could have been a way to maneuver the Spectrier to have it win, but it just looks like it's being a healthy mod to me. I mean, again, we've mentioned it, this tier kind of feels like it's in a weird spot, where HO is really good, there's not really any, like, standout piece, maybe Spectrier and Roaring Moon, that, like, banning is really gonna do too much productive. I mean, it might help. Maybe banning Spectrier is going to like push the direction of the tier in a good direction. And this is something I've said in the Discord. If Spectrier gets banned and people are like, okay, well, we still want to work on HO, so let's suspect Roaring Moon. I was like, okay, if that's the direction we're going, that people kind of agree is the way to balance the tier, I'll vote on a ban for Roaring Moon. Why not? But it's just like right now, looking at this, I don't know. I'm undecided. But anyway, let's see this game play out. So yeah, like most obviously, broadcast Terra. Lovely 60%. And Spectre dies. But this just kind of opens things up for Mewtwo. I love Mewtwo. Boots Mewtwo, my beloved. This is something I've really liked running on HO. This is so nice. Such a nice mod. Oh right, this was this one.
yeah, let's not talk about this Mewtwo set. It was
one's
really
fun.
good in testing. It just didn't end up being useful in this game.
Yeah. But yeah, now this pretty much just comes down to, is it Hypnopothra? Ooh. And it misses! But, I mean, that's just also the game with a Spothra.
I mean, even then, I still had one.
Yeah. It's like,
well, even without that miss, the game was
yeah.
over because I would just go hard into Roaring Moon and Terra, and it can't kill me. So
Yeah.
the game is over.
But yeah, no, so it's like, I think, again, that one's just Spectre being cool. I like that one. But yeah, that's all the replays
I think it's
we
a
have.
good showing of like a healthy mon. Yeah, because I don't think it's broken. I mean, this is the first time that I'm saying it publicly, but I've said it privately a couple times. I don't think Spectrier is broken. The problem right now is we have to pick where we draw the line of what's broken and what's not in this tier, and that's just the nature of Gen 9, right? It's finding where we want to say the balance of the tier should be. And I mean, is banning Spectrier going to fix all the problems? No. But then it's just going to be the next mon up, right? Then it's going to be Roaring Moon, and then it's going to be whatever is next, Arceus Ice or Arceus Poison, and it's just like, eventually you just have to draw the line and say, okay, what level of bullshit are we willing to put up with? And for me personally, I am okay putting up with Spectrier because I don't think it's actually a broken Pokemon, and I do not think it actually puts too big of a strain on the builder. If you are building well, and sure, like if you're really scared of it, like I mentioned earlier, you commit to things like Spadef Terapagos for now, even though that's going to rise. Eventually, Qianpao will fall back into the tier next month, I believe, is what it's looking like. So
it's looking like
with Pao,
we'll
that is another faster revenge killer.
I don't think it's guaranteed, but it's definitely trending towards likely. It needs to drop like
so like if Pao
1.5%.
drops back in, that's another faster Monothera. Because Crush should be almost always knocking it out. It's a Bootsmon, so it's going to be immune to webs, which is going to make webs less valuable. So again, like there's a lot of things of, this is theory modding speculation right now for me, but it's also a thing of, I personally don't find the Pokemon broken. I don't think it is the biggest causer of variance in this tier, and as such, like I will always vote to suspect to let the community decide what they want to do. But for my own for my own perspective of whenever I go and get Rex is I do not believe that Spectrier is broken and or ban-worthy, and I think because of the fact that it only fits on HO, and honestly is a pretty healthy presence on HO, it does not need to be removed from our metagame. The Pokemon
Yeah.
that is the most broken is Roaring Moon, but
Yeah.
we're not discussing Roaring Moon right now, we're discussing Spectrier.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how I feel about Spectrier. I think the way that I build teams tends to rely a lot on E-Killer, or if I don't have E-Killer, I have Boots Mewtwo or Terapagos, or some other way of dealing with Spectrier. And like occasionally I've ran Boots Deoxys, or the Boots Bundle, along the lines of that, or Scarf Samurott, or I'm even forgetting,
Agility on random
Dragonite,
things.
yeah, agility on random Arceus forms. So it's like, I've never found Spectrier to be particularly bothersome within the
Yeah.
builder, to the point where I, like, need to constantly be thinking about it. But I also understand that not everyone builds the way that I do. I like to think that I have a fairly good read on what's good in this meta, and have been building accordingly. But,
Yeah.
you know,
And I
if
mean,
I
that's
ever
why we
go
suspect.
and build some balance, yeah, like if I go build balance right now, you know, I might actually consider Alolan Muck because the ghost types are really, really strong right now. Also, it gives a viable knockoff mon, which we're really hurting for. So it's like, yeah, like maybe there are things um, that can be done to get to like prep for Spectre, even if we don't think they are already. Because at the end of the day, it just doesn't have the set variance required to like really scare me
Yeah.
around preview.
And I mean,
Like
that's
something
something.
like Zacian or Arceus
Yeah.
Dragon or Necrozma Dawnwings has done previously, where it's like you don't know what set you're going to be seeing, and each one has just blatantly completely different counterplay, and it's really, really difficult to deal with that.
And that's something we like started to touch on at the start of the video, but I don't think really dived into is just how much the fact that you always know what Spectre is going to be, at least in part running. Because again, people are going to throw in that it's like Calm Mind, like hex sets are good right now. That's not something I very much agree with. And it also doesn't change some of the counterplay. Like I think the move that the most changes a lot of how you handle Spectrier is sub. But even then, because like you're taking hazard chip, you kind of want recovery.
Well, sub
Um,
loses instantly to
mhm.
no, but sub instantly loses to like E-Killer
Yeah,
and stuff
exactly.
like Alolan Muck. Like
Because you don't
you
have that taunt,
like
right? Like,
E-Killer literally turns sub
mhm.
Spectrier into setup fodder. Like you actually
Yeah,
just start setting up
no,
in front of it because it can't taunt you and it doesn't do enough damage.
that is
And
like
then they don't want to Terra because then they're weak to E-Speed after.
exactly. Yeah, it's I think that because it's so broadcast, what it is, that makes that resource management that I talked about earlier a lot simpler. Um, because you're not looking at Spectre and being like, well, I have my Terapagos, but I don't know if the Spectre is going to suddenly bust out the plot fighting gem focus blast. Like that's a very bad faith argument, but just like for the kind of insanity that some people were saying Zacian felt like. It's like where you can load a Quagsire, all of a sudden, oops, it's Terra Grass Trailblaze, and you have nothing. Where it's just you don't
Or it's
have that
just
here.
fucking choice banded and it just
Yeah.
good you.
And it's like, we don't have that here. It's like you have a Scarf Urshifu Rapid on your team, which not a bunch of people are doing, but like Epsi really loves it. I've ran it a bit. It's like, you have a Scarf Urshifu Rapid on your team. You know you're always going to have a Spectre out, provided it's not into like webs. For then, it's like you're running Scarf Urshifu Rapid, I'm running removal. Uh, like, that's just the thing. You, we know what this thing does. It's not a question of like, oh, how is it going to innovate next? Um, which is really, I think, what started to push Zacian
Yeah,
over the
there really
edge.
isn't much to
Hmm.
there really isn't much to innovate at this point
Yeah.
because like it's really just up to the last move slot on Spectrier. However, if people feel that it is
Hmm.
overwhelming and it gets banned, it's not really the end of the world,
It's not the end of
right?
the world.
Like
I mean, as
it's
we've mentioned, it is a
still
replaceable
an
slot on
HO mod.
HO. Yeah. It's like, I think at the end of the day,
I
if
don't think
Spectre,
it's that big of a deal.
yeah, if Spectre does get banned, it's like, maybe it'll make the tier a little bit better because it takes out one of definitely the better parts of HO. Um, right now, that's like putting in a lot of game in game out effort. But it is just going to be like replaced by another HO mod. It's not going to, I think, super negatively affect the viability of HO. I don't think it's going to make things like balance more
No.
viable. It's like, I think it just puts us into a similar dynamic where HO teams are built a bit different. If that's what people want, let's go for it. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
and I mean,
I'm interested
I
to see what
think the
happens.
perspective of it it doesn't fix all the tier's problems, but it's a start. It's a step in the right direction. Like with Zacian, is a
That's
completely valid point
yeah.
because yeah, banning Spectrier would be removing one more threat that you have to deal with. So it's like that is a perfectly valid argument, and that I
Yeah.
understand, and I even use for Zacian. It's just for me, like I discussed earlier,
Hmm.
where I draw the line is
Hmm.
with like Zacian and Spectrier is I don't
Hmm.
think because of Spectrier's limited nature and
Hmm.
just being more telegraphed in general, I don't find it to be actually a problematic Pokemon.
Yeah, because I mean, both of us were like you more than me for sure. But both of us, because it's like I feel like there's going to be someone that goes back and fact checks this. We were on the fence, like vocally, somewhat on the fence about Zacian. I was very open about leaning.
Yes.
I was very open about leaning pro ban because it was where I was willing to draw the line. But it's something that's important to say. It's like as part of all these arguments. Um, I'm newer to the tier. I'm gonna like I will be the first to tell you that. I've been playing this thing for about 6 months. Uh, but so it's like I wasn't around for something like NDW. From what I hear, it was pretty stupid. Um, but it's like it's not gonna be a case of like, oh, this thing is so clearly strong that it's just completely wreaking havoc in the tier. We can't consistently check it. Uh, and it's like even the thing that can beat the set its face won't always beat it. And it's just like it's not nothing in the tiers like that right now. Zacian wasn't like that. Zacian was just a level of unpredictability that kind of pushed it over the fence, and it was the fact that it was just kind of constantly innovating and you couldn't know what you were going to check. I mean, again, if Zacian stuck around, I was gonna start like smacking people by bringing back the sub Sword Stance Terrablast Ghost set. Like that Ron had so
Yeah.
much room to innovate and do new things. Spectre doesn't have that.
No, like we have blatantly found the things that Spectrier can do.
Yeah.
And, is there some room for innovation in the last lap? I'm sure there is, but right now it doesn't really feel like that's something that's really that big of a concern.
Yeah. So,
So, yeah, that's at least the way that I feel personally is like yes, there are things like Zacian had that level of variance. Um
mm-hmm.
that Spectrier doesn't. So, yeah. And I was very on the fence about Zacian because the defensive utility it provided for the tier
Oh my word,
was
yeah.
extremely, extremely valuable. And I made that point over and over, over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
However, decided
Mm-hmm.
that the variant that Zacian ended up providing, just due to the the nature of its set,
Mm-hmm.
uh, was too much for them, and ultimately other people agreed with me.
Yeah.
But it was a close vote. It came down to one vote, so like either way was a perfectly valid way to vote, and I don't think it would have been a bad thing for Zacian to stay, just like I don't think it's a
Mm.
bad thing for Spectrier to stay.
So yeah,
Like
I
it's
think
just about
yeah.
where do we where do you personally draw the line for what you want to
Hmm.
vote?
And I think that's a good place to kind of end it off. I mean, as we said, we're biased. I think we've kind of injected our bias into this video, but I feel like we've also done our best to kind of leave it up in the air. I mean, this is already proven to be a bit of a divisive suspect so far. Um, and I hope that by watching this, you get some more ideas on maybe how to shape your thoughts. And do you agree? Do you disagree? I don't know. You can let us know in the comments here, or we'll also have a link. Well, I'll make sure that Ocean puts a link to the suspect thread in the forums for if you'd like to leave a lengthier comment there or something and be part of that discussion. Or you can come join the Discord and chat with us more directly there. Um, but
And if
yeah.
you're and if you're on the forums, you should definitely go and watch my video where I go through all my teams that I used in UMBD because I totally just glazed myself the entire video and I think I'm the GOAT. So go watch
And
that.
while this video is happening, I don't know when this is going to be out, but if this video is out before YouTuber seasonal signups close, go sign up for that. Go play. Go play. Uh, Figure out what you like using. Give your thoughts on what feels strong right now. Play on the ladder. Lots of people have been playing on the ladder recently. And just have fun. This has been a fun tier to be a part of, and I'm so glad that I can be part of it in things like this video, and I really hope you enjoyed watching. So that's going to be it from us. Uh, Subscribe to the channel, because I think I'm supposed to say things like that, or else people will get disappointed in me for not promoting. Um, Join the Discord, play the tier, comment, things like that. So that's bye from me. If you have any last words.
Yeah, I'm the GOAT.
I'm also the goat. You're just more of a goat.
Mhm.
Okay. See you later.